We are building 2D animated space game with the JavaScript and HTML canvas. We want our games to feel interactive and we want those interactions to feel good. One way to do that is by responding to user actions with animations and sounds. When user clicks an asteroid, we will play one of 3 randomized explosion animations from a sprite sheet and one of 6 random sounds. We learned how to create asteroids by using object pool design pattern to improve performance and memory management of the codebase. I will turn explosion animations into an object pool as well. Let me show you a simple way how to handle multiple object pools following good beginner-friendly coding practices. This is part 2 of the project. Part 1 and the full series is linked in the description down below. I don't really want to draw the image here. I want to hide it with CSS and later we will draw it on canvas. Instead of hiding each image separately here, I will create a class called hidden. And I wrap all my images in a div with a class of hidden. If I want to add more images, I can just put them inside this container and they will be hidden automatically. Here we have the asteroid class. We handle asteroids using object pool design pattern. When asteroid gets destroyed, we will play explosion animation from a sprite sheet. We will achieve that by returning asteroid object back to the pool and we will have another object pool with explosion animations. When asteroid gets destroyed and it returns back to the pool, we will take its coordinates, we will pull explosion object from the other object pool and we will draw it at the coordinates of the asteroid. It will be a very quick event. We will just cycle through all animation frames of the explosion once and then it will automatically return back to the pool. So we will have asteroid class and explosion class. Object pool members. They will be stored in 2 separate object pools, and inside the main game class I will show you how to handle multiple object pools in a single codebase. We will have to refactor some things, but it's actually quite easy. When we know how to do this, we can turn anything and everything in our game into an object pool to get some performance increase. Today we are learning how to animate explosions from a sprite sheet, how to handle multiple object pools at the same time, and we will also add interactivity, scoring system and sounds. I will show you how to make the interactive events to feel good by playing sounds and animating explosion animations from a sprite sheet when we destroy asteroids. It's important for games to feel good, and making them respond to user actions in this way will go a long way towards that goal. Let me show you. You can see I created an explosion class. It expects game as an argument and converts it into a class property. I do that because I want to have access to all the properties and methods that sit on the main game object. Each explosion will need x and y coordinates. Initially, I set them to 0, 0, but they will be getting these coordinate values from the asteroid that gets destroyed. Speed will be 0 at first. Image will be pointing to that image we created in index.html and we hid it with CSS. I gave it an ID of explosions. We want to animate the sprite sheet by jumping from frame to frame quickly, creating an illusion of continuous movement. To do that, I need to know the width and height of a single frame in the sprite sheet. Sprite width will be 300 pixels and sprite height is 300 pixels as well. These are quite large high-detail sprite sheets. Same as the asteroids, explosion objects created using this class are object pool members. And as we discussed in the previous part, every object pool member needs to have a few things. It needs to have a property that indicates if it's currently hidden, available and free in the pool, or if it's currently being used, being drawn and animated. We need properties that will navigate around the sprite sheet. Frame X will define horizontal frame. Frame Y will define the vertical frame. Because of the way I constructed this particular sprite sheet for you, cycling through horizontal frames using frame X will play the actual animation. Frame Y value will define which one out of these 3 available explosion animations will be played. I want each explosion object to be randomly assigned one of the 3 available explosion animations. So I set frame Y to a random value between 0 and 3, because we have 3 rows. I need integers here. I can't set frame y to 1.5, for example. There is no row 1.5. So I wrap this in math.floor to round it down to the nearest lower integer. Now frame y can be 0 or 1 or 2. Max frame will define the maximum horizontal frame. When frame x reaches that value, we know the entire animation sequence has been played. We will need a draw method to draw the sprite sheet. We need update method to cycle through the sprite sheet frames. And as we said, this is an object pool member, so we need a method that will return it back to the object pool when we are done with it, and a method that will run when the object is taken from the pool to reset its properties to default and to start the animation. So explosion is an object pool member, same as asteroid, which also has free property to indicate if it's currently being used, as well as reset and start methods. Reset method will return the object back to the pool, so inside we set free property to true, indicating this object is free and available, waiting for us to use it when we need it. When I take it from the object pool, I will run start method and I will set free to false. The object is currently being used and it's not free and it's not available for now. Okay, what's next? What did we do here on asteroid class? If asteroid object is currently inactive, it's just waiting in the pool, we don't want to be increasing its angle value. It should be like this. Down here on the explosion class, I only wanted the code that draws it to run when free is false. Same with update. Draw method will expect context as usual. Inside we will use built-in canvas draw image method. It needs at least a minimum of 3 arguments: image we want to draw and x and y coordinates where to draw it. Before we finish explosion class, I want to display it whenever we click anywhere on canvas, just for testing. Any code we place inside a class constructor will be executed at the point when we create an instance of that class using the new keyword. I'm already taking advantage of that here by making sure that createAsteroidPool method runs automatically when game class is created. We can also put an event listener in here. I will listen for click event. The only thing you have to watch out for here is binding of this keyword. If I need to use this keyword from inside this click event listener, I need to make sure that the object this keyword points towards is this game class. We can bind it, or even simpler, I can just use ES6 arrow function syntax. Arrow functions were created to simplify function scope, and they simply inherit this keyword from the parent scope. By using an arrow function here, I'm making sure this keyword will get inherited from the class it was defined in, and in this case it will always point to an instance of this main game object. That allows me to access any methods and properties on this main game class from inside this event listener. So when an instance of game class is created using the new keyword later, constructor is called. CreateAsteroidPool method is called to fill asteroid pool array with 30 asteroid objects, and an event listener for click event will be created. Before we add explosion on click, we want to pull it from an object pool. So same as we are creating asteroid pool, let's create a pool of explosion objects. Job of each explosion object will be just to find coordinates of asteroid that was destroyed and play explosion animation sprite sheet at that location, and to play sound later as well. I will need another method to create explosion pool like this. I put it in a separate method just in case I want to have different amount of each object type. I will rename a max to max asteroids, and I use it here in createAsteroidPool method. Here I declare max explosions, and I use that value here inside createExplosionPool method. I like to set these maximum values to a small number at first. It makes it easy to test when the code is running, because I can easily use and deplete all 3 available objects, and I can check if they are correctly returning to the pool when their animation was finished. When we have only 3 objects, it's easy to see. If I had a pool of 1000 objects here, it would be impossible to track it without some helper code. Lowercase e here. I rename getElement method to getAsteroid. And I will create getExplosion method. Each object pool needs a way to create the pool and a way to get free available object from the pool. Inside, we will cycle over explosion pool array. We check the objects one by one. As soon as we find the first object with free property set to true, we return the object and we stop searching. Inside render method, we will cycle over explosion pool array and we will call their draw and update methods. Same as we are doing for asteroid pool on line 136. Now that we have all the logic in place, we can add explosion animation on click. I can take X and Y coordinates of the mouse click directly from this auto-generated event object and use them inside the event listener. But if I want to use mouse coordinates all over my codebase, I will need a class property where I can store them. I create a property called this.mouse and I set it equal to an object. Its X property will be 0 at first, same for Y. Let's console log this auto-generated event object. I open browser console and when I click somewhere on canvas, I will get this pointer event object. We have all kinds of information here about the mouse click event that just happened. I need X and Y coordinates of the click, but because our canvas element is not full screen, canvas is smaller than the browser window and it's centered in the middle. I need to use offset X and offset Y properties, which will account for the distance between the top and left edge of canvas and the top and left edge of the web page. This is important to get the correct click coordinates. If canvas is full screen, we can use X and Y properties. If it doesn't cover full screen and we have some space around it, we use offset X and offset Y properties. I assign these values to mouse property on the main game class, making them available outside the event listener. They will be available all across our codebase. First, let's test if everything works and simply add explosion object and play explosion animation from the sprite sheet every time we click somewhere on canvas. So helper temporary variable I call for example explosion will be equal to this.getExplosion method we just defined. If it found a free available explosion object in the pool, take that object and run its start method we defined on line 81. JavaScript needs to know where on canvas we want to draw that animation. Here we have X and Y properties, so I take them, put them inside start method. They will be passed to it as argument when it's called. And here where I call it, I just pass it the current mouse coordinates. It doesn't work, so I must have forgotten to do something. I console log this explosion variable and it's undefined. It means nothing is being returned when getExplosion method runs, so I check that method. All is good here, so I know the problem is not here. I check the class. Also everything is good. Let's keep tracking the logic until we find the issue. Here I am using that class and pushing 3 explosion objects into explosion pool. And now I see the problem. I forgot to call this method to actually create the pool. I call it down here. Now, when I click on canvas, I draw the entire large explosion sprite sheet and I console log that object. Perfect. I don't really want to draw this entire massive sprite sheet. I want to crop out a single frame and I want to play the entire animation frame by frame. When I reach max frame, I am done with it and I will return the object back to the pool. Up here, I'm passing draw image just 3 arguments, which means it just takes the image and it draws it at full size at these X and Y coordinates. I can also pass it with an height like this, which will squeeze or stretch the image to fit in that area. Now it's squeezing the entire sprite sheet into the area of 1 frame. To animate a sprite sheet, we need to pass the drawImage method 9 arguments. This is very important to understand. We pass it the image we want to draw, source X, source Y, source width, and source height to specify which part we want to crop out from the source sprite sheet, and destination X, destination Y, destination width, and destination height to specify where to draw that cropped out image on canvas. Right now I am cropping out just one frame at coordinates 0, 0. This one. We animate sprites by jumping by the size of a single sprite frame around the sprite sheet. To draw the animation frame by frame. So horizontal cropping coordinate, source X, will be the width of a single frame times frame X from line 64. And for every animation frame, increase frame X by 1. And that's it. We click and the entire animation sequence plays. When I click 3 times, I depleted my pool. I have only 3 objects in there. I say if frame X is more than max frame, meaning that the animation played out, call reset method to return the object back to the pool. I click 1, 2, 3 times. I keep clicking, but we get no more animation. So I open browser console and I see that we are pulling and returning these 3 explosion objects correctly, but for some reason animation is not playing after the first 3 times. When I take an available object from the pool, I set its X and Y coordinates, and I also need to reset frame X back to 0 so that it can play the frames from the beginning for me. Now I can click over and over and it will play these 3 objects for me over and over. Nice work! I want the animation to be centered exactly over the mouse cursor, so I offset horizontal X coordinate, destination X value passed to drawImage method by half of sprite width. Now they are aligned vertically. I also offset destination Y by half of sprite height. And now it's centered exactly over the mouse. I want to play a random animation, not just the first row. For that, we defined frame Y argument, which can be 0 or 1 or 2, so I use it here as source Y argument passed to drawImage method, defining vertical cropping coordinate. It will be sprite height times frame Y. Now each explosion object gets assigned one of the 3 available animation rows in the sprite sheet. If you click fast, you will see different animations. I think this is playing very fast and my screen refresh rate is 60 frames per second. If somebody has high refresh rate screen, those 22 frames will animate in a fraction of a second. It would be good if we had a way to control how fast we want explosion class to serve animation frame so that we can slow it down or speed it up whenever we want. I will use the same technique we used to periodically add new asteroid into the game, only this time that periodic event will be serving the next frame in the animation sequence of explosion sprite sheet. Again, I will need 2 helper properties, animation timer, which will count from 0 towards animation interval. When timer reaches interval, it will trigger the event and timer will reset back to 0 so that it can count again. Animation interval could be, for example, 10 frames per second, 1000 milliseconds divided by 10. One frame will stay on the screen for around 100 milliseconds before it gets replaced by the next frame in the sequence. Here inside update method, we will write that logic. If animation timer is more than animation interval, trigger the periodic event, so that means run all this code. Also set timer back to 0 so that it can count again towards the next periodically served animation frame. Else, meaning timer is not yet higher than interval, keep increasing timer by delta time. Delta time will be passed as an argument. I calculate delta time here. I pass it to render here. Inside render, it's coming from here, and I will pass it to update method on explosion class. Let's test it. Now, when I click anywhere on canvas, explosion animations are played and slowed down to 10 animation frames per second. We have something over 20 frames, so the entire animation sequence lasts for around 2 seconds. If I click more than 3 times, I have to wait until one of the 3 explosion animation finishes playing and the explosion object is returned back to the object pool before I can click and play it again. So, since I know that everything is working and we have fully functioning asteroid object pool and explosions object pool, I can go up here and I can create larger explosions pool, so maybe 20. Perfect. Now I can click anywhere on canvas and explosion animation will be played at 10 frames per second at these coordinates. We can control the frame rate of this animation separately from the frame rate of our game by changing the value here. Now I'm animating at 2 frames per second, which means that each animation frame will last for around 500 milliseconds, half a second. This is a good thing just to test it if all frames of the animations are being correctly displayed, and that we can see everything from frame 0 to max frame. It's easier to notice any potential issues when the animation is slowed down like this. This is not completely accurate because I am accumulating delta time value until this interval value is reached. And then I serve the next animation frame. But since interval value is not usually divisible by delta time without remainder, and I am not accounting for that remainder in my code, the actual animation speed is a bit slower than the number I set my FPS to here. I don't think it's a problem because by not calculating that remainder, I'm saving some performance and I can still control animation speed by changing this value. Just keep in mind that when you set it to 60, it's not actually animating at 60 frames per second, it's not at full speed. So if I want something closer to 60 FPS, I set it to maybe 70. I choose a value here that is not too slow but also not too fast, so we can appreciate the details of these animations. When I set it to 25, it means that this animation sequence will play out in just under a second. This is good. I want asteroids to automatically explode when they hit the right edge of the screen, so we will call reset if horizontal x-coordinate, the center point of the circle, is more than width of the game area minus radius of the asteroid, like this. When they disappear, we want to play explosion animation at those coordinates, so I create a helper variable I call explosion. This will pull and hold available explosion object from the pool using getExplosion method we defined. This method sits on the main game object, and I can access it from here, from inside the asteroid class, because here we have a reference pointing to that game object, which allows me to call this getExplosion method defined on line 143. If there is at least one available free explosion object in the pool, we take it and we call it start method. I know that method expects x and y coordinates where we want to draw it, so I pass it x and y coordinates of the asteroid that was just destroyed. I test it by playing the animation. When asteroids move across the screen and hit the right edge, they explode. Perfect. In games, it's also important to be able to check when two objects collide. Most commonly, we use simple collision detection formula between two circles or two rectangles. There are many other collision detection algorithms, for example something called separating axis theorem to check collision between polygons. In one of my older videos I also did collision by color. For this project we will use circle collision detection, and we will have it on here as a reusable utility method. It will expect object A and object B as arguments, and it will return true or false to tell us if the objects collide or not. Collision between two circles works like this. We calculate the distance between the center point of circle A and the center point of circle B. We compare the radius of circle A with the radius of circle B. If distance is less than sum of radii, we know the circles collide. So sum of radii is radius of circular object A and circular object B. Keep in mind that all objects we want to compare using this check collision method need to have radius property, otherwise this will not work. The way we can calculate the distance between 2 points, in this case the distance between the center point of circle A and center point of circle B, we imagine a right triangle in between them. We have this side, I will call it dx, the difference between center point of circle A and center point of circle B on the horizontal x-axis. We have dy, the difference between the center point of circle A and the center point of circle B on the vertical y-axis. So these are two sides of the right triangle. Here we have a right angle, and the side opposite to the right angle, the longest side, also called the hypotenuse, is the actual distance between these 2 points. We know the size of this side and of this side, and we know this angle is 90 degrees. Since we know all these things, we can use Pythagoras theorem formula to find out the length of a hypotenuse. The formula is square root of dx squared plus dy squared, because c squared is equal to a squared plus b squared. We can also save ourselves all these calculations and use built-in math.hypotenuse method. This method calculates everything and it automatically returns the square root of the sum of squares. In this case, it will simply give us the size of hypotenuse if we pass it dx and dy. And that's all we have to remember about this for now. Circular collision detection is a very important technique in creative coding and in 2D game development. As you use it more often, it will become very easy, so don't worry about it too much for now. I will make it directly return the result when this expression is evaluated. So if distance is less than sum of radii, return true. We know that the circles are colliding. Else, meaning the distance is equal or more than sum of radii, it will return false, there is no collision. We have a reusable collision detection method we can use all over our codebase whenever we want to quickly check if two circular objects collide. A very important thing here is to remember that both objects we are comparing, object A and object B, we pass to check collision method as arguments need to have radius property, x property and y property, otherwise this code will not work. I want to use this method to check collision between mouse and asteroids. I know my asteroid objects already have radius property, but I need to make sure mouse object also has radius. I will give it radius of, let's say, 2 pixels, so when we call this method, we will check collision between asteroid circles and a small circular area around mouse, 4 pixels in diameter. Asteroids have radius set to 75 pixels here on line 12, so these circles are 150 pixels across. I uncomment this code so we can see those white collision area circles. Right now we play explosion animation when asteroids hit the right edge of canvas or when we click somewhere around canvas. Here inside click event I will cycle over asteroid object pool using built-in array for each method. For each asteroid object, I say if check collision method between asteroid we are currently cycling over using for each method, and between mouse object we define on line 110, if it returns true and collision is happening, only then call getExplosion, and if there was available explosion object in the pool, play its start method. I only want this code to run if asteroid is active, so if its free property is set to false. Because we have both active and inactive asteroid objects in asteroid pool array. As x and y coordinates, I will pass it x and y of the asteroid we just destroyed. Let's see. We are triggering animations, but the asteroids need to disappear when I click them. I will call reset on the asteroid that just collided with mouse to return it back to the object pool. It feels really good when I click it and it plays the animation, and it will feel even better when we attach randomized sounds to it in a minute. Before we do that, let's implement a scoring system. Every time asteroid is destroyed by a mouse click, we increase score by 1. We need to create that score property here, and I will also set max score to 10. Let's draw that score. I will define font up here. There's no need to define it inside draw method or render method over and over. If possible, we should try to define all our canvas settings once for performance reasons. In this case, it's easy because I only want one font style all over my code base. I will do 20 pixels Helvetica. Fill style will be white since we have dark background. Here inside render method, I will write some code to draw the text. If we had more complex text and maybe even some game status trackers, I would create a special text handler class, but in this case it's fine just to do it here. I take context and I call built-in fill text method. It needs at least 3 arguments: the text we want to draw and x and y coordinates, or an anchor point in relation to which the text will be drawn. By default, text is left aligned with alphabetic vertical baseline. The text I want to draw is score at coordinates 2035. I will also concatenate plus this.score, dynamic score variable value. I destroy a few asteroids by clicking on them. This works, perfect. Win condition will be something simple for now. If score is more than max score, draw winning message. Text will be you win. Final score is plus dynamic this.score variable value. I want the message to be exactly in the middle of canvas horizontally as well as vertically. This is what we get. As I said, and this is very important if you ever work with text on canvas, fill text and stroke text methods take at least 3 arguments: the text we want to draw and x and y coordinates of anchor point of that text. Where the text sits in relation to these coordinates depends on values we give to text align and text baseline properties. By default, text is left aligned. I center the text by setting text align to center. Problem is that when this code runs and winning message is displayed, it applies this text align to all text on canvas, including our score message here. I set winning score to 3 for easier testing. I only want this text align property from line 193 to apply to the winning message, not to all text on canvas, so I wrap this code between save and restore built-in canvas methods, restricting changes to canvas state only to this area. Now score text stays left aligned, winning message is center aligned. When winning message is displayed, I don't want the player to be able to increase score any further, even when they click and destroy more asteroids, so up here I say only increase score when the score is less than max score. Let's test it by winning and clicking one more. Yes, this works. The score doesn't go any more up after we reached max score of 3. I adjust the winning message text. My plan is to make this game more fleshed out with spaceships, space monsters, planets and lasers if you like this project, but I wanted to go over all the important techniques in a beginner-friendly pace so that we can better understand everything when we expand on these ideas. I will also remove these collision area circles, we don't need to draw them anymore. So far, this is a very simple game. Sometimes it's better to explain these principles on a smaller project before expanding them in a more ambitious code base. I play. I win. Nice, we have a very simple game loop. This is very easy. Maybe I should make the asteroids move faster. We could do many things. Maybe we need to click all the asteroids before they move across the screen because there is a planet there to protect. When I destroy the asteroid, I want it to transfer its speed to the explosion animation, so it keeps moving at the same speed that the asteroid was. Explosion animation has speed of 0, it just stays in place. Here I increase horizontal x coordinate by speed. And to transfer that speed from asteroid onto the explosion object, it will be passed as an argument to explosion start method and assigned to class property, like this. Here, where I create the explosion, I pass it a third argument for that speed value. It will be speed of the asteroid we just destroyed. Now when we click, explosion keeps moving. Asteroid object transfers its speed to the explosion object. Maybe we can transfer just a fraction of the energy relative to the speed of the asteroid. How about just 40%? Yeah. I delete this bit. As you can see, we have a bug when asteroids get destroyed by crashing to the right edge of the game area. It's because the speed property is undefined when that happens. I need to pass it as the third argument to start method here as well. And in this case, I want the speed to be 0. It's a solid wall. I don't want the explosion animation to travel any further when asteroids break on the wall. When I click, they still transfer their speed. Good. This works well. To make the collision even better, let's play a randomly chosen sound. You can download some sound files in the resources section below, or you can use your own sounds here if you want. In this case, I will use the simplest possible implementation of audio by using the audio element. It has some advantages. For example, it's simple and quick to set up, but we don't have as much control over the sounds as we would have if we used Web Audio API. The main disadvantage is that we can't play the same audio element twice at the same time, so if we get another collision before the previous one finished playing, there will be no sound. There is a simple technique to fix this, very useful. If you want to know how, keep watching, because I'm about to show you. I have 6 different explosion sounds, each one with a different ID, because I think it's much better to play a few different sounds than just always repeat the same audio every time. Make sure you get the file names and IDs correct here, it's easy to make a typo. I'm talking from experience. If our game had more complex sound design, I would create a separate audio handler class, but in this case we will handle all the sound logic here on the main game class. I create properties for each sound file, simply pointing towards each audio element using getElementById, like this. My goal is to randomly pick one of them each time explosion animation plays. So one way to easily pick one random value out of 6 options is to put all of them into an array. I have to make sure they are comma separated. Yes. So we have an array that holds a reference to all 6 audio files. Here inside the class constructor, I will assign each one a sound by using this.gameReference from line 60 to access the explosion sounds array we just created. I choose, for example, the second audio file in that array, audio file with an index of 1, because we start from index 0, it's an array. I will give it a custom play method that will handle and play the audio file. Inside, I will take this.sound from line 73, and since that class property points towards a HTML audio element, I can call built-in play method on it like this. I will call the custom play method from line 93 from inside start method. I click the asteroid, start method is triggered, and audio is played. Nice. Notice that if I click another one, before the audio finished playing, we get no sound. Only after the audio file finished playing, it will play again. This is one of the main downsides of using HTML audio, because in my opinion, person who designed it didn't do a very good job. You can't even play it in a seamless loop. More on that later in the series. The way we solve this issue is by resetting audio file to the beginning every time play method runs. This is why I created this custom play method here. I set current time to 0, like this. Now it will work, and every time collision animation starts playing, audio will reset to the beginning and it will play the whole sound for us. Easy solution. Up here, I can try the first element in explosion sounds array, sound with an index of 0. Index 4 is a different sound. So how do we randomly choose one of these 6 available sounds? By randomizing the index. Math.random times 6 Wrap in math.floor to round it down to the nearest lower integer. So each explosion object will now have one of the 6 sound files assigned to it. Instead of hardcoding 6 here, I can replace it with explosionsounds.length in case we decide to add or remove some elements from that array later. Because explosions don't happen that often and because we are using object pool for these, we are basically just pulling the same 2 or 3 explosion objects from the beginning of the array over and over, resulting in repeating sounds. I can randomize that sound every time we play it to make sure we get to hear all 6 available sound files. Let's see. Yes. Now I'm getting all 6 sounds, not just the 2 or 3 over and over. If you are coding along with me and you now have a playable version of this, I hope you agree that the gameplay feels much better when it reacts to our clicks with animation and with sounds at the same time. It makes the game feel quick and responsive. I know I was going slower than usual in this project. I wanted to make sure even beginners can follow and get the basics right. We can now expand on the techniques we learned and take this space game to the next level. How about rotation, character animation, lasers and projectiles? Keep watching the series if you want to make your own animated space game with me and learn about JavaScript and 2D game development at the same time. I increased max score to 30. Click the like if you found some value today. See ya!